Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. My name is Jesus Nava. I'm the Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation Securities. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about EasyLanguage, specifically how to adjust colors and style of indicators dynamically using EasyLanguage. So we're going to take a look at, all the reserved words and all the syntax that is necessary for you to adjust the style and colors programmatically. So before we get started, the usual disclosures, just keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, that active trading is not suitable for everyone. Past historical performance is no guarantee of future results, and we all need to be aware of the risks that are associated with trading online. You can go to www.tradestation.com/important-information if you want to read a little bit more details on these disclosures. Let me go ahead and switch over to my TradeStation platform. I was going to switch over to my TradeStation platform. Let me just stay here on the PowerPoint since I have some EasyLanguage elements that I'd like to cover with you before we go over to the platform and see the practicality of some of these code. So let's go ahead and start off with what is smart styling. By the way, smart styling is the way that you can enhance a study's visualization, meaning that you can change the color, you can change the style, and make it look the way that you want. And EasyLanguage allows you for the dynamic styling of a study plot based on rules. So if something's happening, you can change the color of a plot, which is pretty interesting because it adds a visual element to your studies that you probably did not have before. If you have a crossover, and in addition to the price crossing over a particular line, you also change the color of that line, of course, that just enhances and confirms the visual for you. We're going to take a look at some of the reserved words in the language and also some functions that allow you to do precisely that, adjust the color and styling of the indicators. The first one is set plot color. As you can see, is a word that has no spaces in between, and it's a word that you can use in charting and in radar screen. In fact, as we go through the different reserved words and functions, we may look at examples on the TradeStation platform on how you can modify existing studies to make them look the way you want. For now, we're going to go through all the different words, like one after the other. I'll give you a brief description of what they do, and then we'll go into the practical examples of each one. But set plot color is a reserved word that when used in EasyLanguage is going to set the color of a particular plot. Now, the plot can be a line, it can be a dot, it can be a cross, it can be anything. It can even be, the actual font color if you're using it on radar screen. That's why it says here it's a reserved word that you can use on indicators for charting and also indicators for radar screen. You have another reserved word here called set plot width. Now, this is only used in charting, and what it does, it changes the thickness of a plot. For the most part, when you create an indicator, it's going to have a default thickness, and usually that thickness is rather thin. In my taste, I like to make my indicators a little bit thicker, but programmatically, you can also adjust the thickness of a line, which is interesting because you may have, a thin line if something's happening, and then it gets thicker and thicker as some criteria is met. Let's say, for example, volume. You can also reference volume and make sure that the line that you're plotting on the indicator gets bigger or thicker and thicker as volume increases. Another word is set plot BG color. Now, the BG in this reserved word means the background. It's only used in radar screen. Now, this doesn't apply to the chart. It would be very cool for this word to work on charting and be able to, change the background of the chart programmatically. I think that would be very cool. But for now, the set BG color or the set background color only works in radar screen. And what it does, it just changes the background color of that cell. And we're going to take a look at an example in today's class. Color names. There are some names that are already defined in the EasyLanguage code, and you can use the word right out of the box. And colors like black, white, red, and blue are colors that you can just use the name and EasyLanguage will understand. I believe there is a total of 16 colors, 16, that have been predefined in the language, and you can use them just type in the word. A lot of times we use that and it's very straightforward, but if you want to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of color, you can use an RGB function. RGB, if you're into selecting colors and knowing the red, green, and blue combination color to get a particular color that you want, then this is the function that you use. It's also been created as a function in the language. RGB, by the way, stands for red, green, and blue. And the numbers that are inside that function, it's a particular shade of that red, green, and blue that when combined, it creates a very unique color. Of course, the RGB function gives you access to over 16 million colors. How is it 16 million? Because that number, 255, could be any number from 1 to 255. It creates a particular shade of each one of those colors. Now, if you multiply 255 by 255 by 255, you get about 16, a little bit over 16 million. And that's a number, and that's a number of color combinations that you can create using the RGB function. Gradient color is a reserved word that allows you to establish two main colors for a minimum and a maximum range of values. And the gradient color reserved word will pick a color in between based on the value of that particular plot. Let's say, for example, that you're plotting ADX values. ADX, it's an indicator, a technical calculation that lets you know if there is a trend happening currently. So sometimes if you want to create a shading of color based on the ADX value, so if it's at a low number, it's one color, but if it's at a high number, it's a different color. And anything in between, it just takes a shade between those two colors. That's what a gradient color does. And it's a very visually interesting type of styling because it creates sort of a heat map between a minimum and a maximum, which I find to be very interesting. And finally, we have a my color reserved word that you can use as well. In addition to those 16 colors that we've added as predefined, we also have a whole collection of colors that are used inside the my color reserved word. This is a different way that our engineers provided you the ability to select colors. And we're going to take a look at all of those once we go into the examples, okay? Let's go ahead and look at the first example, which is set plot color inside of an indicator, whether it's a radar screen or a chart. It changes the color of a plot based on a particular condition, or it also changes the text color inside of a radar screen cell. This is an example code. This is an example based on the MACD. If the MACD crosses above 0, then set plot color to green. And if MACD crosses below 0, then set plot color to red. Notice that inside the parentheses, we're using the actual word green and the actual word red. So these are colors that already exist in the language. Now let's go ahead and let's go to the platform. And we're also going to go to the development environment to see where can we access a list of those predefined colors. Let me go over here to my TradeStation platform. And let's go ahead and insert a study. I'm going to go here to Studies, Add Study. All right, and I'm just going to do a moving average one line. We're going to do modifications to this moving average one line, but any modifications that we do here in this example can be applied to any indicator of your choice, even indicators that you've created yourself. I'm going to just add it here to my chart for now. All right, it just is using the default parameters. I haven't changed anything. I believe I've changed the default thickness though. This moving average one line, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, probably uses the thin line that TradeStation uses for default indicators. I tend to like my lines a little bit thicker. So what I do is I double click on the line I go to the Style tab, change the thickness, and then I set that as my default so that every time I use that indicator, it has that little bit of a thicker line. So let me go ahead and click OK to that. In here, I'm going to right click on that moving average, and I'm just going to go edit easy language for moving average one line. The code is going to be the default code for the easy language. You know, I may want to maybe create an indicator of my own or make modifications to this one. Whatever you want to do, it's fine. Just be aware that if you make modifications to the original, you're not going to have access to that original code anymore. So if you want to keep the original intact, then we suggest that you save a copy of this and then modify the copy, right? So let me go ahead and go to File and click on Save As. I'm going to create a copy of this, and I'm just going to say colors, just a dash and the word color, so that I know that this one is the one that I modified for colors. I'm going to click OK, and you can see that now it's a different indicator with a different name. So let me verify this before I continue. It's still verifiable. I can, condense the code, and I do that many times because a lot of times I don't need the tooltips functionality that is up here in the inputs. And if I want to condense the view of this indicator, I can do that. Let me go ahead and remove the tooltip information. If you've been in my easy language classes, you know that I do this many times. What I'm removing here is the information that is being in between the square brackets. And the functionality, if you're not really sure what that does, it's there so that when you hover over an indicator name on TradeStation, let me show you that in a real indicator. If I double click on this moving average and I go to the inputs, if I hover over price, I get a tooltip. It says enter an easy language expression to use in whatever. So that tooltip is generated by that piece of code that I just removed. A lot of times when I write easy language, I don't need it because I'm creating my own inputs, so I don't need a reminder of what they are. But as you start using TradeStation, these tooltips will help you understand what parameter is the indicator looking for. But in my case, I don't need it, and I'm just going to organize my inputs one after the other. I have a variable, and it's calculating an average, and then I'm plotting that average. All right, this is using a display and a current bar greater than that absolute value. A little bit of additional code, but all that is not really required for an easy language indicator. So I can remove all that and just go straight into my plot statement, just like that. And if I'm not going to use an alert criteria, I'm just going to remove this altogether. Okay, so that simplifies the code a lot. I remove a lot of the extra information that's there. I'm just going to verify this to make sure that it's verifiable, because the idea here is just to change the plot color based on its position in relationship to the price bars. And this is what I'm going to do. If the close is greater than AVG, and I'm using AVG because that's the variable that's in here. So if the close is above the average, then, and I'm going to use the word that we saw in that PowerPoint, set plot color. I'm going to open up parentheses. I'm going to have to specify the number of the plot that I'm changing the color of. Remember that in TradeStation, when you program in easy language, you can have up to 99 different plots. So if you have an indicator that has multiple plots, plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, you have to tell the set plot color reserved word which one of the plots is it the one that you're changing the color of. In this case, I only have one plot, which is plot number 1. So I'm just going to type in the 1 in there. And then we separate the two parameters with a comma. And now you have to tell easy language, okay, what is it the color that you want to use when the condition is true? I'm going to type in cyan and close the parentheses and then type in a semicolon. Notice that cyan is a color that comes up in blue, meaning that TradeStation understands it. Let me right click on that cyan and go to definition of cyan. Okay, this provides a definition of cyan. When I do this on a color, under remarks, I see a link that says EasyLanguage colors and their corresponding numeric value. Let me go ahead and click there because this opens up the list of colors that are preset on TradeStation. These are the 16 colors. It's 1 through 16. You have the RGB value here, and then you have the actual name that you use. So out of the box, you can use any of these colors and type them inside the parentheses, which makes it very convenient. Okay, let me go ahead and leave this help documentation in the background, and I'll come back to it to provide you a little bit more information. So I'm going to say, if the close is less than the average, then set plot color of plot number 1, and I'm going to do magenta. Again, that's a color that exists on that list. Does it? Sure. Cyan is right here, and magenta is right here. Okay, so let me verify this. I've set my color conditions. Let me go over here to my TradeStation platform. I don't need this indicator anymore because I created one of my own. So let me go ahead and go to Studies, Add Studies, and I'm going to add this moving average one-line colors. I don't need to edit it. I'm just going to click OK, and this is the way that it looks. Notice that anytime that you have the moving average below the price bars is going to be painted cyan, and anytime the bars are above the moving average, that moving average is going to be painted magenta. Does that make sense? It's a very interesting feature. Now let's go ahead and make some modifications here in terms of color. Let's say, for example, that you want to use a color that is not part of this list right here. Okay, maybe you want to use more of a gold color or a turquoise or any color that you can think of. Come over here and go to the colors link right here at the bottom. We have the My Colors. This is the My Colors function. Now the syntax is My Colors and then the color name. It provides you a few examples of those colors like azure, chartreuse. I'm not sure if that's pronounced that way, but we have orange, rose, violet. Those are colors that are not in that list that we saw previously, but these are colors that you can use. Let me go ahead and search the documentation here for color. See if I find the list here so you can see it. So search for color, EasyLanguage colors and corresponding numeric values. If I go up here, it gives me these. Now you also use this is what I did previously. I just went to colors here and I didn't find an additional link. So let me go back and back again. And let me go here to a different topic. I'm going to go here to the color class. And in color class, let's see. Okay, here we go. When I scroll here on this color class, this is where I see all the color names. And you have aqua, you have beige, you have, brown, all these other colors that cannot be typed inside those parentheses as they appear. Only the ones that are bolded here are the ones that you can type in without any function. But let's say, for example, that I want to use the color chocolate and I want to use coral, these two colors. Chocolate, let's do a little bit more contrasting. I'm going to do beige, and I'm going to do chocolate, okay? And what I do here is instead of using the word or the color name alone, I have to use My Colors. Notice that it turns purple because it's a function. And then I have to open up parentheses and supply the name of that color inside quotations. So I'm going to do chocolate, just make sure that it's typed in exactly as it appears on the list. And in this other place, I'm going to choose My Colors, open parentheses, and I'm going to do beige here and close parentheses. Let me verify this. It's verified successfully. And when I go back here to my TradeStation, you can see that now I'm using the beige and chocolate colors on my indicator. So again, it opens up yourself to have access to more colors than just the default 16. Let me go back here to my help documentation. In addition to giving you the name of that color, it also gives you the RGB function or the RGB numbers for that color. Let's suppose that I want to use this fuchsia. You know, we know that it's a 255, 0, 255. That's red, green, and blue. 255, 0, 255. If I want to use the RGB function, let me go back here to my code. Actually, let me go back here because I want to use cyan and fuchsia. Fuchsia is 255, 0, 255, and cyan is 0, 255, 255. Let me go back in here to the code. And in the code, instead of using my colors, I'm going to use RGB. And inside the parentheses, I'm going to supply the numbers. So 0, 255, 255. And over here, let's do RGB. And for the color, we're going to do 255, 0, 255. Just make sure that it's the right color combination. Let's verify that. That verifies successfully. Let me go back here to TradeStation and notice that now we have the colors as this is fuchsia and cyan. So any way that you want to identify the color, whether it is using the 16 words that you can use right out of the box, whether you want to use the my colors function, or you want to use the RGB function, whatever way you want to specify the color, it's up to you. They all work the same way. Let's continue on my presentation of the PowerPoint. Set plot width sample code. So this allows you to change the width of a study, and it does not work in radar screen because there's no line there for you to change the width of, you know? This is an example. If close crosses above average or close crosses below average, then set plot width 1, 4. Now notice the note there, 4 means the thickness. Now let's go over here to my TradeStation because I want to do something, you know, interesting here on this code. Let me go here to my EasyLanguage. And what I'm going to do is add some additional conditions. If close crosses over AVG or close crosses under AVG. So I just wanted this to happen on the crossover. Then set plot width, set plot width. And I'm going to do for plot number 1, and I'm going to set it to a 5. Now, when you go into the settings of an indicator, let me show you what that looks like. Let me go ahead and double click on this line. And when you look at the thickness options that you have here, the thinnest one is going to be 0. So the options you have on thickness are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It goes from 0 to 6. And that's the number that you can supply inside of here. I've selected a 5, which is almost the maximum. And let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to set the width to 5, but I'm also going to set the plot color to yellow. Let me go ahead and end this statement. I'm having 2 actions here. So I have to create what's called a if then begin and end kind of block. So if the condition is true, then begin. I have 2 actions, set the width and set the color. Let's go ahead and verify this. And let's go ahead and take a look at how this looks on my chart. Click OK. I notice that anytime that there's a crossover, not only the line changes to yellow, but it also changes the thickness. So I have this thick yellow kind of line or segment on my chart. It's interesting because this is one of the longest yellow lines. The reason for that is because we had a crossover to the upside, then we have a cross under to the downside, and then it crossed over to the upside. So every single bar met the criteria of that crossover, and that's why it looks a little bit longer. Hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully this allows you to create more interesting types of indicators. Let's go over here to my PowerPoint and continue on here. Oh, here's a little bit of information about the thickness. It ranges from 0, the thinnest, to 6, which is the thickest. Set plot DG color sample code. This changes the background color of a radar screen cell. It doesn't work in charting. We already talked about that. And this is the example code for changing the background color. Similar to what we've been doing before, where if the criteria happens, then you set the background color to color you want. We already talked about colors and how you can specify colors on TradeStation on EasyLanguage. Let me go over here to my TradeStation platform and show you how that's going to look. Let me open up a radar screen. All right, let me go ahead and add a symbol list. I'm going to do the NASDAQ 100. I'm going to add a technical indicator. Let's go ahead and add the indicator that we just created for charting, which is this moving average one with colors. I'm going to move it down so it's at the very end, and I'm going to click OK. So take a look at how the radar screen indicator interprets my EasyLanguage syntax. It's going to provide a color to the font. And that's based on what the indicator is doing in relationship to price. Let me go ahead and change the interval here to daily. All right, and let me go ahead and remove a few columns here because I want to bring a chart in here. Let me copy the chart from my previous workspace, right click, copy the window, go to this other workspace, right click and paste the window. All right, let me go ahead and resize it so that it's right here at the very side of my radar screen. There we go. And I'm going to link these two windows together. So notice that for Apple, my moving average is cyan. I click on Apple, and it's cyan because the closing price of the current candle is above the line. I have here a moving average that is yellow. If I click on it, the reason for it being yellow, let me open this up. It's that it is crossing right now. It hasn't crossed, on the closing of the bar. In real time, it has. But because, the previous candle was on the top side and this other candle is on the downside, I was expecting, that little line here at the very end to be yellow. I'm not sure why it's not displayed in yellow, but you can see that the radar screen indicator is taking on the color that I specified based on, where the price is in relationship to that line. Let's take a look at this other one. Okay, like for example, AEP, notice how the tip of that line is yellow. If I go here to eBay, then again, the tip of that line is yellow, which is the behavior that I was expecting. So when the crossover happens, then the font is yellow. This is a cool way for you to know which symbols are crossing right now. And you can tell by the color, because that's the condition that we specified. If you're crossing over, turn it yellow. One thing that this moving average indicator is missing, though, is direction. It doesn't tell me which direction the crossover is happening. So you're not really sure if it's a bullish or a bearish crossover until you go into the indicator and look at the chart. For example, we were looking at eBay. Let's see, eBay is crossing right now, but you can see that it's crossing to the bottom side, but you couldn't tell from this yellow. CSX Corporation is also crossing right now as we speak. Well, not on this one. Well, the crossover is happening to the bottom side, so it is crossing. The current value of the average is 33.23, and the close is 33.21. So it's technically crossing right now. So it's interesting that you can identify those crossovers in real time, but it doesn't tell you, which direction the crossover is happening. Let me go ahead and right-click on this study and edit the EasyLanguage. It'll bring up my code one more time, and I'm going to make some changes to the background color. Let's do it here on the color. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm just going to add an additional condition here that says Well, this is interesting because now I would have to separate the condition here. This if-then block statement uses an or condition. So whether it's a crossover or a cross under, I'm applying the colors, right? But here, let's go ahead and do something different. If close crosses over AVG, then set plot BG color. Notice that the reserved word has to come up in blue. If you're typing it and it doesn't come up in blue, it's probably because you made a typo and you have to go back there and check the spelling one more time. This is to the background. I'm going to do a dark. If it's a crossover, we're going to do a dark blue. And if the close crosses under AVG, then set plot BG color of plot number 1. I'm going to make it dark red. Let's verify this. And let's go back here to radar screen. There we go. As you can see, the background of the cell is colored in red. Let's see if there's any bullish crossovers. Here we go. So Microsoft is showing a bullish crossover. It's painted in blue. Let's go ahead and confirm that. Let me go to Microsoft. So in here, yes, it's bullish because the prior day, we had a close under that moving average. On the current bar, we're closing above the average, so that's a bullish crossover. So it's an interesting way of you adding that additional enhancement to your indicators that it provides you more information. The moving average indicator by itself, it's missing that component of direction, and you have to pull up a chart to see where the crossover is happening. But now if you add a color to the background, for sure, which direction the crossover is happening. Let's go over here to my PowerPoint and continue on different examples. Referencing colors in EasyLanguage, we already talked about this. You have the legacy colors, white, black, red, green, blue. Those are the ones that you can type in directly without the need of a reserved word or a function. You have access to the 16 million colors using the RGB reserved word, and it's used very simply. You just type RGB, and then inside parentheses, supply the 3 numbers for the red, green, and blue combination that gets you the color. And you also have, the platform named colors, and you can go to that list of colors, and then you have to use the My Colors function in order to reference it. I think we provided 3 examples of those syntax in our moving average indicator. Gradient colors, it's a very cool way of coloring your indicators because it creates a heat map kind of coloring where you have a minimum and a maximum, and then the gradient takes on a color from a shading between those 2 main colors. And this is the way that it's created. First, you have a variable. A variable is what's going to hold the color, but you have to use gradient color, which is the main reserved word or function that you have to use in EasyLanguage. You have to supply what is it, the variable that you're going to apply the color to, the minimum value, the maximum value, the minimum color, and the maximum color. And then you have to set the plot color to that variable color. Let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. Let me go ahead and go back here to my platform. All right, and let's go ahead and add an indicator like ADX. Okay, the ADX indicator, let me go ahead and resize this a little. Okay, the ADX indicator provides you a value based on whether the price is moving or not. Sometimes if it's low, for example, these red numbers are below, I believe, the 20 threshold, it's considered that there's no visible trend. But any high number here is considered to be trending. Now, let's go ahead and take a look. Let's sort the ADX values from biggest to lowest. So the biggest is 53, and the smallest is 7.63. So if I go here to this symbol, AZN, and I look at what's happening to this security, you can see that it's pretty much flatline. There's no evident trend. And if I go over here to the one that has the maximum, which is CrowdStrike, you can see that it's very prominent trend. So the higher the number in ADX, the more prominent the trend is. So it'd be great for us to color code that ADX based on that value. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and right click, go to studies, and I'm going to edit the EasyLanguage for the ADX. All right, this is the code for the ADX. I'm going to create a copy. Let me go ahead and go to File, Save As, and I'm going to call this ADX gradient. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to go over here to the plot statements. Right, here's the plot. Before the plot, I'm going to create my condition. I'm going to store my color in value 1. You can use a user declared variable. Value 1 is one of those pre-declared variables that you can use. And for a gradient color, I can just use one of those pre-declared. And I can use equals gradient color, exactly like that. Make sure that it turns blue, otherwise you misspelled it. And I want to apply the color to the ADX value. Where did I get this name from? From up here. It's one of the variables that the indicator uses. That's what I want to apply the color to, the ADX value. And it's plotting ADX value here. All right, let me go ahead and ADX value. Then I have to supply the maximum value, the minimum value, then the color for the minimum, and then the color for the maximum. If you don't remember the order of parameters, you can always right-click on the gradient color reserved word and go to definition. And this will tell you, what's the order of parameters. Here's the example, gradient color, and this is RSI value, 2080, white and blue. So we already know that the minimum value for the ADX is approximately 7. So I'm going to put that as a minimum value. And the maximum value we set around 50. I'm going to set 50 as the maximum value. And we're going to go from red to yellow. But in this case, we already know that for the radar screen indicator is changing the plot color for the triggers, right? Maybe I want to disable this code, right? So if I want to block this coloring so that my coloring applies, I just have to enclose that inside French brackets, squiggly brackets, and then it comments all that out because I want to just use the color or the color gradient in the background to know, what's the minimum and what's the maximum. So that's my gradient color. And all I'm going to do is this. Not if then statement. Set plot BG color of plot number 1 to value 1. Notice that I'm not using a name for the color, or I'm not using one of the color names, but I'm using value 1, which is the predefined variable that I used up here that contains my color. Let me go ahead and take a look at this. Let me verify. Let me go here to my TradeStation. Let me remove some columns here. Let me remove the net change. And I'm going to hide the trigger level here. Show hide trigger level, because I want to add the ADX that I just added to compare. So I created one called ADX gradient. I'm going to add it and I'm going to move it down. All right, this is the way that it looks. Let me go ahead and sort by alphabetical order, the symbols in alphabetical order. And now you can see that any low number has a red background and any high number has a yellow background, which is hard to read here on the actual indicator. So if I want to change the color of the font, I just have to modify the indicator. I'm going to go to the style tab, actually the color tab, and change the color to black. Okay, let's go ahead and click OK. All right, that's the gradient color based on maximum and minimum values. A lot of times, there's another gradient formula that's a little easier to use. It doesn't require you to know the minimum and the maximum. It just uses a look back to determine that on its own. Let me show you that variant in case you want to use that other gradient color. The reserved word would be norm gradient color, and it's not a reserved word. Sometimes, it's hard to know if it's a reserved word or a function. You kind of know once you type it in. If it turns magenta or purple, you know that it's a function. If it turns blue, then it's a reserved word. But gradient color, it's a reserved word, but norm gradient color is a function. Let me show you what this does. I'm going to right click on that function and click on the definition. So here on the norm gradient function, we need the data series value. We need to tell the function if this plot crosses 0, meaning that you have negative and positive numbers, and it's either a true or false. Then you have to color number length. How far back do you want to look? And then the up color and the down color. Let me show you what that would mean here. So I'm still applying the color or the color to the ADX value. This is not crossing 0, so I'm going to turn that to false. 20 is the number of bars that it's going to use the look back period to determine the highest and the lowest. And I'm going to use red and yellow. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I just made slight variations here. Let me verify this. And then let me go back here to my TradeStation and see what this looks like. You can see that there's a lot of red and there's a lot of yellow. I don't see a lot of in between. The reason for that, let me explain how this is calculated. I'm going to go to studies here and go to and add my ADX, because we told the indicator to look back 20 bars. So on a chart, it would look like this. So on a chart, it would capture this low of this is an ADX of 1645, and I'm not sure. I think it takes this high over here, 2938. But we know if we squeeze this chart, we know that the highest value here, it's probably not 20 something. It's this is the highest value, 55. And in order for us to reach that, we probably need to add, or the look back has to be more, right? So in here, let me go back here to my code and then change this to maybe 100. Look 100 days back, and I'm just going to verify that. Let me go back here to my code, and then we start seeing a little bit of the oranges, because now we're making the indicator look back a little bit further. It doesn't quite reach this high of 55. In order for me to reach that, I have to go back to the beginning of 2021 or the end of 2020. So that means that I would have to go here into the code and probably make this a 250 or even a 300 so that it captures those high and lows. Let me go back here to TradeStation. And here we go. So now we can see a little bit more variation in the colors. But this is the type of function that you don't have to supply, what the minimum and the maximum values are. You just tell it a look back period, and it finds what the minimum and the maximum are automatically for you. Okay, that's the content, I think. Let me go back here one more. So minimum color and max color can be set using any color name convention. Yep. And that's it. That's all the examples that I had for you. Hopefully, this presentation opens up your way of creating indicators so that you can use smart styling and enhance the visual of studies. We looked at changing the color of a line, changing the thickness of a line, changing the background of a radar screen cell, and also using gradient color. So hopefully this helps you in your EasyLanguage programming. Thank you guys for spending this time with me. Welcome to the TradeStation Master Class. Make sure that you check Jesus Nava, our event schedule to see the classes that are upcoming for TradeStation Securities. Have a wonderful day. Today we're going to learn a little bit about EasyLanguage.